The hum of Aethelburg Reach was a familiar lullaby to its inhabitants, a testament to aging machinery and the sheer stubbornness of its chief engineer, Dr. Aris Thorne. He stood before a sputtering diagnostic panel in sub-level maintenance bay 3, the air thick with the scent of ozone and hot metal. "Just a little longer, old girl," he muttered, coaxing a coolant valve with a well-aimed tap from his multi-tool. "Just hold together a little longer." Aethelburg Reach, nestled precariously on a resource-rich but atmospherically volatile moon orbiting the gas giant Caelus Prime, was the galactic equivalent of a forgotten shed at the bottom of a very large garden. Officially designated a Class Gamma Research and Resource Extraction Outpost, it existed in the Kepler's remnant, a sparsely populated stellar cluster mostly ignored by the opulent core worlds of the galactic Concord. Aris Thorne, a man whose pragmatism was as deeply etched on his face as the schematics he constantly reviewed, considered the Concord a distant, largely irrelevant entity. His world was defined by pressure seals, power conduits, and the endless battle against entropy. He rarely thought about the grand tapestry of galactic politics. His focus was on ensuring the colony's 3,000 souls had breathable air and stable gravity. Today, the main atmospheric regulator was throwing another tantrum, its vibrational signature just shy of triggering an automated shutdown. He sighed, running a hand through his thinning gray hair. Another sleepless night beckoned. Miles away on the moon's windswept ochre plains, Lyra Nova knelt beside a towering, pulsating organism. The Solaris Phyto-Spire, one of thousands that dotted this specific region, thrummed with an internal light, its broad, petal-like appendages cycling through hues of emerald, gold, and a deep violet. Lyra, a xeno-botanist whose youthful enthusiasm hadn't yet been entirely eroded by Aethelburg's monotonous grant cycles, adjusted the biosensor array near its base. "Fascinating," she breathed, her breath misting in the thin, chilly air. The spires were unique to Caelus Prime's moon, their complex bioluminescence patterns seemingly random yet subtly responsive to stellar radiation. Most of the colony saw them as pretty, if slightly eerie, background flora. Lyra suspected they were much more. Her research proposal, investigating potential sentience markers in Solaris Phyto-Spire light harmonics, had been met with polite indifference by the Aethelburg Science Council, who prioritized ore yields and hydroponic efficiency. Still, she persisted, driven by a curiosity that felt as vital as the air she breathed. The colony's security fell to Commander Rettiarton Jax Stonewall Volkov. The commander part was mostly honorary now. His actual force consisted of a dozen overworked civil patrol officers and a collection of repurposed survey drones. Jax watched the ochre dust devils swirl outside his small office window, his gaze distant. He'd come to Aethelburg Reach seeking quiet obscurity after a decorated but ultimately disillusioning career in the Concord's border fleets, fighting skirmishes no one in the core worlds remembered or cared about. Here, the biggest threat was, usually a critical equipment failure or a brawl in the mess hall. He preferred it that way. Yet the latest batch of heavily filtered news feeds from the Concord relay had stirred an old, unwelcome disquiet. Whispers of a new power, the Kryll Hegemony expanding ruthlessly through the Lesser Magellanic Cloud. Stories of entire systems going dark. Just static, Jax, his comms officer, a fresh-faced ensign named Ryla, had said when he'd asked for enhanced signal decryption. Probably just pirates or another corporate squabble. Jax wasn't so sure. The patterns described, methodical, overwhelming, leaving nothing behind, didn't sound like pirates. It sounded like something else, something colder. He pushed the thought away. Aethelburg was small fry, a speck of dust on the galactic map. The Kepler's remnant was a buffer zone, too far, too undeveloped to attract serious trouble. The Concord, for all its bureaucratic inertia and political infighting, would surely deal with any genuine threat long before it reached their quiet corner of space. He hoped. Later that day, Aris finally managed to stabilize the atmospheric regulator, its hum settling into a less alarming rhythm. He stretched, his back cracking in protest. Another crisis averted, another day eked out. As he walked through the central dome, past families enjoying their evening meal under the soft glow of the light panels that mimicked a distant sun. He felt a grudging satisfaction. This was his purpose, to keep this fragile bubble of life functioning, on the edge of nowhere. Lyra, reviewing her sensor data in her cramped lab, noticed a new, complex sequence in the Phyto-Spires light patterns, a ripple that seemed to coincide with a minor solar flare reported hours earlier. A subtle, almost imperceptible resonance. It was another piece of a puzzle she was determined to solve. And Jax Volkov, staring at the star charts in his office, traced the reported trajectory of the Kryll advance. It was still light years away, a problem for other people, other fleets. But the Kepler's remnant, for all its vast emptiness, lay undeniably on one of the projected expansion vectors, however improbable. He hoped his well-honed instincts, the ones that had kept him alive through forgotten wars, were wrong this time. Because if they weren't, Aethelburg Reach was in the path of a storm it could never hope to weather. The tranquility of Aethelburg Reach, fragile as it was, shattered 3 weeks later with the unscheduled arrival of the Star Wanderer. It wasn't a grand entrance. The ship, a battered Xylith freighter of ancient design, limped into Kalis Prime's orbital space, emitting a desperate multilingual distress call that even Aethelburg's outdated comms array couldn't miss. Jax Volkov was on the command deck, a small utilitarian space that usually monitored ore freighters and outbound survey missions when the alert klaxon blared. Unidentified vessel, non-standard IFF, heavy radiation scarring on the hull, Ryla reported, her voice tight with alarm. They're broadcasting on all emergency channels, declaring catastrophic systems failure and requesting immediate sanctuary. Jax leaned over her console, his eyes narrowing at the telemetry. The ship was small, clearly not a threat, but its energy signature was erratic, its trajectory decaying. Origin? Broadcasting Xylith registry codes. Planet Xylos. In the Valerius Nebula. Ryla's eyes widened. Sir Valerius went dark 2 standard weeks ago. Concord declared it a probable Kryll incursion. A cold knot formed in Jax's stomach. Hail them. Offer medical and engineering assistance. Guide them to landing bay Gamma 7. And Ryla, he added, his voice grim, restrict all outgoing comms traffic regarding this arrival until we know what we're dealing with. No need to cause a panic. The Xylith were a slight avian-descended species, their feathery crests drooping with exhaustion and terror as they disembarked. There were fewer than 50 survivors, mostly civilians, their colorful traditional robes stained and torn. Their leader, a tall Xylith with haunted, intelligent eyes named Elder Kalen, spoke of the Kryll with a hushed, trembling reverence usually reserved for vengeful gods. They did not conquer, Kalen rasped, accepting a thermal blanket from a medtech. They consumed. Our cities, our forests, our people, biomechanical horrors, silent, relentless. They swarmed from colossal, dark vessels. Our defenses, they were like children's toys. His gaze swept over the concerned faces of the human welcome party. Xylos was a member of the Conquered. We appealed for aid. They promised assessment fleets. None came. Jax listened, the old familiar chill of foreboding settling deep in his bones. The Kryll tactics Kalen described, the overwhelming numbers, the systematic dismantling of planetary infrastructure, the chilling efficiency, matched the fragmented intelligence reports he'd been piecing together. This wasn't pirate activity. This was extermination on a galactic scale. He immediately tried to relay Kalen's first-hand account to the Sector Concord liaison on Port Corvus, the nearest administrative hub, light years away. The response, when it finally came, after a frustrating comms delay, was a boilerplate acknowledgement. Report received. Data logged. Aethelburg Reach is advised to maintain standard vigilance. Kryll activity in Valerius Nebula is under investigation. No credible threat to Kepler's remnant assessed at this time. Bureaucratic imbeciles, Jax snarled, slamming his fist onto his desk. They'll assess us all into oblivion. The arrival of the Xylith stretched Aethelburg's resources thin. Eris Thorn, initially grumbling about the added strain on life support and power reserves, found himself overseeing the integration of Xylith engineering principles to patch their damaged ship. He watched as human and Xylith engineers, despite language barriers and wildly different technological bases, found common ground in the universal language of broken machinery. His cynicism softened as he witnessed the quiet dignity of the refugees and the colonists' unprompted efforts to provide them with food, shelter, and comfort. "Damn it," he confessed to Jax one evening over nutrient paste. "You can't just turn them away, can you? Not when they look at you with those eyes." Jax merely nodded, understanding the sentiment all too well. Human compassion, it seemed, was a stubbornly inefficient but persistent variable. Lyra Nova, drawn by a desire to help, volunteered to assist with the Xylith children. Many were orphaned, shell-shocked into silence. She used simple picture cards, trying to teach them basic Terran words, offering a small measure of distraction. One small Xylith hatchling, a female named Zephyr whose crest was a dull, frightened gray, shyly pointed to a picture of the Solaris Phyto-Spires Lyra had pinned to her workstation wall. "Glow trees." "Pretty," Zephyr chirped in broken universal. Standard, a rare utterance. Then her small clawed hand trembled as she added, "Bad ships. No like. Glow trees. On Xylos. Small ones. They go round." She made a wide, arcing gesture with her hand, indicating avoidance. Lyra frowned. "The Kryll ships didn't like the glowing plants on your world, Zephyr." Zephyr nodded vigorously, her eyes wide with a child's certainty. "Bad ships turn, not go near glow trees." It was a tiny detail, easily dismissed as a traumatized child's fragmented memory. But Lyra, whose mind was already attuned to the mysteries of bioluminescent flora, filed it away. The Xylith homeworld, according to Elder Kalen, had possessed a unique bioluminescent ecosystem, though nothing on the scale of the Solaris Phyto-Spires. A coincidence, perhaps, but the Kepler's remnant was defined by its unique ecologies. Jax, meanwhile, intensified his efforts to prepare Aethelburg, however futile it seemed. He ran drills, inventoried every piece of equipment that could conceivably be used as a weapon, and pored over the colony's schematics, searching for any defensive advantage, however slight. The Concord might be blind, but he wouldn't be caught unprepared. The whispers had become warnings, and the Xylith were living, proof that the storm was no longer distant. It was gathering, and Aethelburg Reach lay directly in its path. The other shoe dropped with the brutal indifference of a falling asteroid. Long-range sensors, painstakingly recalibrated by Eris's team to scan further, and with greater sensitivity than their original design specifications allowed, screamed, a warning into the quiet hum of Aethelburg's command center. "Multiple contacts, sir." Ryla's voice was sharp, cutting through the low murmur of the bridge. "Outer marker of the Kepler's remnant. Concord designation, Kryll harvesters. 3 of them. Massive." Jax was at her side in an instant, his weathered face grim as he stared at the tactical display. 3 crimson icons, stark against the starfield. Harvesters. Not scouts in the traditional sense, but vanguard elements of the Kryll's resource assimilation machine. Each one was larger than Aethelburg Reach itself. Biomechanical behemoths designed to strip mine moons and process atmospheres. Their presence here, so far from the Kryll's previously known operational zones, was a death knell. "Report it to Concord. Sector Command Priority 1, Jax ordered, his voice deceptively calm. He knew what the response would be. It came 3 hours later, after the harvesters had leisurely advanced another 5 million kilometers deeper into the remnant. Concord High Command acknowledges Kryll presence in Kepler's remnant. Sector fleets are currently engaged on multiple fronts. Aethelburg Reach is designated a low-priority strategic asset. Advise local assets to observe, contain if feasible, and report. Evacuation protocols for non-essential personnel are under review. Under review, Eris Thorne echoed, his voice laced with a bitterness that mirrored Jax's own. He'd been listening in from engineering. They're writing us off, telling us to contain ships that could swallow this entire colony for breakfast. Panic, a cold and insidious tendril, began to snake through Aethelburg Reach. News of the Xylith's plight had already unnerved the populace, Confirmation of Kryll ships in their own system, coupled with the Conquered's effective abandonment, sent waves of fear rippling through the enclosed habitats. Shouted arguments erupted in the mess halls. Families huddled in their quarters, faces pale. The carefully constructed illusion of safety on this remote rock had shattered. Jax addressed the colony over the internal comms, his voice a gravelly reassurance he didn't entirely feel. People of Aethelburg Reach, yes, the Kryll are here. Yes, the odds are significant. But we are not beaten yet. We are humans. We have faced long odds before. He outlined his rudimentary defense plan. The colony's handful of mining ships, like the Rockbiter, would be fitted with their powerful excavation lasers. Their pilots volunteers. Survey shuttles, including the Farseer, would be armed with what few kinetic munitions they had. It was, he knew, pitifully inadequate against the Kryll's advanced technology and overwhelming numbers, but it was something. Action, however desperate, was better than passive despair. Eris, meanwhile, threw himself and his engineering teams into a frantic effort to bolster the colony's defenses. The ancient planetary shield generator, designed to ward off micrometeoroids, and solar radiation, not military-grade weaponry, was pushed to its absolute theoretical limits. Power conduits glowed cherry red as Eris bypassed safety interlocks, rerouting every spare watt of energy from non-essential systems. The colony lights dimmed perceptibly. If they want to crack this nut, he vowed, wiping sweat and grease from his brow, we'll make them work for it. Lyra Nova found herself adrift in the rising tide of fear. Her research, her beloved Solaris Phyto-Spires, seemed so utterly irrelevant in the face of annihilation. What good were light harmonics against planet-killing machines? Yet as she watched the first blurry, long-range visual of a Kryll harvester, a grotesque fusion of dark, chitinous plating and pulsating organic components like some deep ocean, Leviathan adapted for the vacuum of space. A fragment of memory surfaced. Zephyr, the Xylith child. Bad ships turn, not go near glow trees. And her own observation of the Spire's complex, fluctuating energy patterns. A wild, improbable thought began to flicker at the edges of her mind, a thought so audacious it seemed almost sacrilegious in its simplicity. The Kryll harvesters advanced with chilling deliberation, not like warships seeking battle, but like locusts descending upon a field. They ignored Aethelburg Reach itself for the moment, their attention fixed on the smaller uninhabited moons of Kalis Prime. Long, articulated tendrils extended from their dark carapaces, plunging into the rocky surfaces, and the systematic process of planetary deconstruction began. Huge chunks of rock and ice were torn free, drawn into maw-like processing bays. The scale of their operation was breathtakingly terrifying. Jax watched the telemetry, his knuckles white as he gripped the console. His small defense force was assembled, a motley collection of civilian craft crewed by grim-faced volunteers. They were Davids armed with pebbles against a Goliath wielding a mountain. He knew a direct confrontation was suicide. His only hope was to harass, to delay, perhaps to identify a weakness, however infinitesimal. The oncoming shadow of the Kryll was no longer a distant threat or a whispered rumor. It was here, a palpable presence in their sky, a silent promise of oblivion. For the inhabitants of Aethelburg Reach, the edge of nowhere had suddenly become the front line of an unwinnable war. The Kryll, with their cold insectoid efficiency, began their approach to Aethelburg's moon. Two of the harvesters remained in orbit, continuing their methodical consumption of the smaller celestial bodies, while the third detached several smaller, but still formidable vessels. Concord designation, Kryll Terra Reapers. Their purpose was unmistakable: atmospheric processing and surface resource extraction. They descended slowly, ominously, towards the ochre plains where Lyra Nova had spent so much of her time. There, ignoring the main colony dome for now, Ryla reported, her voice strained. Targeting the uninhabited regions first. Standard Kryll resource acquisition pattern. Standard or not, we can't let them get a foothold, Jax stated, his gaze fixed on the descending Reapers. Eris, are those mining lasers on the Rockbiter at full charge? As charged as they'll ever be, Jax, Eris's voice crackled back from engineering. But they're designed to crack asteroids, not engage shielded alien craft. Tell those pilots to aim for unshielded components, joints, anything that looks vulnerable, and to get the hell out if things get too hot. Jax nodded, though Eris couldn't see him. Acknowledged. All wings, this is Volkov. Execute Plan Scythe. Harass, disrupt, and identify weaknesses. Do not engage in prolonged combat. Your primary goal is to buy us time. He switched to a private channel to the pilot of the Rockbiter, a grizzled veteran miner named Sal. Sal, you and the Farseer group will take the lead. Show them what Aethelburg grit looks like. But be smart. No unnecessary heroics. Understood, Commander. Sal's voice came back, surprisingly steady. We'll give them a poke they won't soon forget. The small flotilla of repurposed civilian ships lifted off. From Aethelburg's auxiliary launch pads, a pitifully small swarm against the descending bulk of the Terra Reapers. The Rockbiter, its oversized excavation laser array glowing with barely contained power, lumbered forward, flanked by the more agile survey shuttles, their sensor masts bristling with improvised weaponry. The initial engagement was a chaotic, desperate dance. The mining lasers, surprisingly, managed to score searing gouges across the dark chitin of one Reaper before its shields flared to full strength, deflecting subsequent blasts. The shuttles darted in, firing their kinetic pellets, a hailstorm against a fortress wall, achieving little more than distracting the Kryll. Return fire from the Reapers was terrifyingly precise. Beams of incandescent energy that sliced through space, forcing the human ships into wild, evasive maneuvers. One survey shuttle, the Stardust Drifter, was caught by a glancing hit, its engines flaring explosively before its pilot managed a barely controlled crash landing miles from the colony. Jax, monitoring the chaotic battle from his command freighter, the Last Stand, which hovered protectively near Aethelburg, felt a surge of grim pride mixed with despair. His people were brave, incredibly so, but this was a slaughter. His ship, a slightly larger, better shielded vessel, was meant to be a command post, not a frontline brawler. Yet, as he saw the Rockbiter take heavy fire, its port stabilizer clearly damaged, he found himself nudging the thrusters forward. Ryla, target that Reaper's primary weapon array. Give Sal some cover. It was during this desperate, lopsided skirmish that the universe decided to offer a clue. The Rockbiter, crippled and venting atmosphere, was forced to retreat, its pilot Sal fighting the controls. The Reaper it had engaged, shrugging off the laser burns, adjusted its course to pursue, clearly intending to finish off the wounded mining vessel. Its path would take it directly over a vast, dense forest of Solaris Phyto-Spires, the very same region Lyra Nova considered her outdoor laboratory. Lyra was in the main science bay, ostensibly assisting with sensor analysis but mostly staring, in horrified fascination at the tactical display. When she saw the Reaper's projected course, a sudden electrifying thought shot through her. "Commander Volkov," she yelled into the comm, forgetting all protocol. "The Phyto-Spires, that Reaper, is heading straight for the Solaris Grove." On the display, the Kryll Reaper, a symbol of implacable alien power, did something utterly unexpected. As it approached the edge of the dense Phyto-Spire forest, its smooth, purposeful advance faltered. It seemed to hesitate. Then, with a subtle but definite course correction, it veered sharply, skirting the edge of the massive bioluminescent grove, choosing a longer, less direct path to intercept the retreating Rockbiter. It was as if it had encountered an invisible wall or a repellent force. Jax, focused on the immediate tactical situation of saving Sal, barely registered Lyra's outburst. But then he saw it too, the Reaper's anomalous maneuver. "What in the blazes?" Lyra was already babbling, her words tumbling out in a rush. "The Xylith child Zephyr. She said the Kryll ships on her world avoided the glow trees, the spires. Their energy patterns, Commander, they're incredibly complex, fluctuating, almost a biological broadcast. What if the Kryll can't stand it? What if it interferes with them somehow?" Eris Thorn, patched into the command channel, listened with his usual skepticism. "Nova, with all due respect, we're talking about biomechanical warships that just shrugged off mining lasers. You think a bunch of glowing plants are going to scare them? It wasn't scared, Eris, Lyra insisted, her voice trembling with the force of her conviction. It avoided them, actively. Just like Jax just saw. My research shows the spires emit a unique, multi-spectrum energy, highly modulated. Perhaps it disrupts their communication, their hive mind network, or even their biological components. The Kryll are part machine, part organism, aren't they? What if this specific bioenergy is like a deafening noise or a blinding light to their senses? Jax watched the Reaper give up its pursuit of the now distant rockbiter and rejoin the other Reapers, all of them maintaining a curious distance from the largest concentrations of Phyto-Spires. He thought of the Xylith child's innocent observation, now echoed by the actions of a terrifying alien war machine. It was insane. It was improbable. It was, quite possibly, their only hope. Eris, Jax said, his voice tight with a sudden, desperate focus. How quickly can you and Lyra figure out how to weaponize a forest? Eris was silent for a long moment. The sounds of frantic repair calls and system alerts filled the void, then a sigh. Weaponize a forest. Of course, why not? It's not like we have any sane options left. Get Nova down to engineering, and somebody bring me the biggest damn comms dish schematic we have. The accidental revelation, born from a child's memory, a scientist's obsession, and a pilot's desperate observation, had just become Aethelburg Reach's last stand. The decision, once made, plunged Aethelburg Reach into a new kind of controlled chaos. The Solaris Resonance field, as Lyra had tentatively named her improbable theory, became the colony's sole focus, a desperate gamble against impending annihilation. Eris Thorn, his face a mask of grim determination, transformed engineering into a whirlwind of activity. Schematics for the colony's primary deep space communication array, a massive dish designed for interstellar messaging, not biological warfare, were splayed across every available surface. We need to turn this thing into a focused energy projector, Eris barked, gesturing at the holographic display of the comms dish. Lyra, those energy frequencies your spires emit, are they stable? Can we isolate the dominant, disruptive harmonic you theorize is affecting the Kryll? Lyra, pale but resolute, nodded. The base carrier wave is remarkably consistent, but it's the complex modulation patterns, the light harmonics as I call them, that I believe are key. They fluctuate, almost like a language. If we can amplify the raw carrier and then somehow imprint those specific modulations onto it, she trailed off, the sheer complexity of the task dawning on her. It's like trying to teach a starship's engine to sing opera.
Then you better start conducting, young lady, Eris retorted, though there was a grudging respect in his tone. My teams will handle the amplification. You need to figure out how to feed the music into the instrument. The plan was audacious.
Reroute a significant portion of Aethelburg's main power core directly into the comms dish. Simultaneously, Lyra and a hastily assembled team of botanists and sensor technicians would work to create a master signal derived from live readings of the most potent Solaris Phyto-Spires. This signal would then be used to modulate the amplified energy beam from the dish, hoping to replicate the disruptive effect on a massive scale. They also began the perilous task of harvesting entire, living Phyto-Spires, carefully uprooting them with mining equipment and transporting them to shielded bays near the comms array, hoping their proximity would somehow seed or enhance the broadcast. While Eris and Lyra orchestrated their symphony of desperation below ground, Jax Volkov and his ragtag flotilla became the discordant percussion section, their sole purpose, to buy time. The Kryll Terra Reapers, having regrouped, resumed their methodical advance, their movement still showing a peculiar reluctance to pass directly over the densest spire forests. This bought Jax some maneuvering room. His command freighter, the Last Stand, along with the now repaired rockbiter and a handful of surviving survey shuttles, engaged in a series of daring, almost suicidal, hit-and-run attacks. They couldn't destroy the Reapers. They couldn't even significantly damage them. But they could annoy them, they could distract them. Mining lasers, now fired with a desperate knowledge of their limited effect, seared across Kryll hulls, forcing momentary shield fluctuations. Kinetic pellets from the shuttles pinged harmlessly, but served to draw fire. Jax, drawing on decades of combat experience, directed his tiny force with uncanny skill, using the moon's canyons and the Kryll's own cautious movements around the spire groves to his advantage. "Target their ventral sensor clusters," Jax ordered, his ship shuddering as a particle beam scorched past its shields. "Farseer, pull back, you're drawing too much heat. Sal, can you give me a targeting solution on that Reaper's primary atmospheric intake?" Losses were inevitable. The shuttle comet chaser vanished in a silent flash of light, its pilot's last transmission a defiant curse. The rockbiter took another critical hit, its main laser array fused into slag, forcing it to withdraw. Its crew alive, but its fighting days over. Yet for every loss, for every near miss, precious minutes were gained for the frantic work happening below. The courage of these civilian pilots, facing down biomechanical horrors with equipment designed for peaceful industry, was a raw, powerful testament to the human spirit. Down in engineering, power levels fluctuated wildly. Lights flickered across the colony as Eris and his team pushed the generators past every conceivable safety margin. "Capacitors are overloading in Sector Gamma," an engineer yelled over the din. "Bypass them, reroute through the auxiliary grid." Eris roared back, his hands flying across a control panel, sweat stinging his eyes. He felt less like an engineer and more like a madman trying to chain lightning. Lyra, surrounded by glowing, pulsating Phyto-Spires in a makeshift botanical lab, adjacent to the comms array control room, felt like she was trying to catch whispers in a hurricane. The Spire's energy patterns were beautiful, intricate, but infuriatingly elusive to stabilize into a replicable signal. Almost got the primary resonance lock," she muttered, her fingers dancing over her own custom-built sensor interface. "Just need to filter the harmonic drift." Then, Ryla's voice, colder than the vacuum of space, cut through every channel. "Commander Volkov, all stations. Multiple new contacts emerging from hyperspace, massive signatures. Concord designation, Kryll obliterators, capital warships. They're here." On the main view screen in Aethelburg's command center, and on the flickering monitors in engineering, the new arrivals blotted out the stars. They were colossal obsidian dreadnoughts, dwarfing even the harvesters. The true fist of the Kryll Hegemony had arrived. The reapers and harvesters had been the outriders. These were the executioners. The symphony of desperation had just reached its terrifying crescendo. Time, it seemed, had finally run out. The arrival of the Kryll obliterators cast a pall of utter despair over Aethelburg Reach. These were the vessels spoken of in hushed, terrified tones by the Xylith refugees, planet killers, city erasers. Their dark, mountainous forms hung in orbit, an undeniable statement of overwhelming power. On the main view screen, one of the obliterators began to glow with malevolent energy, its primary weapon charging. For the colonists huddled in shelters, for Jax and his depleted forces, for Eris and Lyra in the heart of their frantic endeavor, it felt like the final curtain call. "Eris, Lyra, whatever you're going to do it now." Jax's voice was stark, stripped of all but the raw urgency of command. His own ship, the last stand, was positioned defiantly between the colony and the nearest obliterator, a gnat challenging a hurricane. "Power levels are critical. The array won't take much more," Eris yelled back, his face illuminated by the angry red glow of warning lights. He slammed a protective covering over a final bypass conduit. "Lyra, it's now or never. Give me the signal." Lyra, her eyes wide, took a steadying breath. The harvested Phyto-Spires around her pulsed in an anxious, erratic rhythm, as if sensing the colossal threat above. Her fingers trembled as she made the final adjustments on her interface, isolating what she prayed was the correct harmonic sequence. "Signal locked, Eris. Sending the modulation pattern now. Full spectrum, maximum amplitude." "Engaging Solaris Resonance field," Eris bellowed, his hand slamming down on the primary activation control. Deep beneath Aethelburg Reach, the massive, deep space communication dish, Now a jury-rigged energy projector hummed with an impossible amount of power. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. Then, a profound subsonic thrum vibrated through the very rock of the moon. From the dish, a beam of pure, white light shot through with iridescent pulsing veins of color that mirrored the Solaris Phyto-Spires, lanced into space. It wasn't an explosion. It was an eruption, a silent, focused wave of incredibly complex modulated bioenergy. The beam struck the nearest Kryll obliterator, just as its weapon was about to discharge. The effect was instantaneous and utterly bizarre. The obliterator's malevolent glow sputtered and died. Its intricate surface, a tapestry of biomechanical components, seemed to ripple. Lights across its vast hull flickered erratically. Its previously purposeful orientation began to drift. Then, the wave of Solaris Resonance washed over the rest of the Kryll fleet, the other obliterators, the harvesters, the Terra Reapers. The same phenomenon, magnified across dozens of colossal vessels. Coordinated formations dissolved into a confused jumble. Kryll ships, renowned for their perfect hive-minded precision, began to move erratically. Some slowed to a dead crawl. Others spun aimlessly. A few smaller Reaper craft, caught in particularly intense nodes of the beam, were seen to convulse, their organic components visibly spasming before their systems went dark. Two harvesters, their navigational controls clearly compromised, collided with a dull metallic clang that resonated even through the vacuum, sending debris tumbling into space. It wasn't destruction in the conventional sense. There were no spectacular explosions, no satisfying wreckage. It was something far more insidious to a hive-minded, biomechanically integrated species. Sensory overload, network collapse, systemic confusion. The intricate web of communication and control that bound the Kryll fleet together was being jammed, shredded by the very specific, very alien frequencies of the Solaris Phyto-Spires, amplified 1,000-fold. "It's working," Lyra whispered, tears streaming down her face as she watched the chaotic display on her monitors. "Gods, it's actually working." Eris sagged against his console, disbelief warring with bone-deep exhaustion. They don't know what to do. It's like hitting a swarm of bees with a sonic cannon." Jax Volkov aboard the last stand stared at the unfolding chaos in stunned silence for a full 10 seconds. The Kryll, moments before an invincible armada, were now a disoriented rabble. Their fearsome power was nullified not by superior firepower but by botany and desperate engineering. He shook his head, a harsh laugh escaping him. "Ryla, all remaining fighters, target vulnerable systems on those drifting ships. Let's add, to their confusion, don't try to destroy them, just poke the bear while it's dizzy." The handful of surviving human ships, emboldened by the Kryll's disarray, darted forward. They were no longer fighting a hopeless defense but exploiting an unbelievable opportunity. They fired their depleted weapons at sensor arrays, exposed conduits, and maneuvering thrusters on the drifting, confused Kryll vessels. It was like a pack of terriers nipping at the heels of bewildered bulls. The Kryll, creatures of cold logic and absolute order, could not process this new reality. Their enemy wasn't fighting by any known rules of engagement. This silent, pervasive energy assaulted their very being, disrupting their neural networks, confusing their biomechanical interfaces. Faced with an attack they couldn't understand, counter or adapt to, their millennia-old combat protocols defaulted to a single overriding directive: withdraw from the source of the disruption. Slowly, then with increasing speed, the Kryll ships began to turn, not in a coordinated retreat, but in a scattered, panicked flight. Obliterators, harvesters, and reapers alike disengaged from Aethelburg's moon, their movements clumsy and uncoordinated, and began jumping to hyperspace, fleeing the Kepler's remnant as if it were a cursed place. The light of Aethelburg, a desperate gambit born of human ingenuity and an understanding of a unique alien environment, had done the impossible. It hadn't destroyed the Goliath, but it had stunned it, confused it, and sent it reeling in disarray. As the last Kryll signature vanished from the sensors, an almost unholy silence descended upon the command deck, broken only by the ragged breathing of its occupants. Aethelburg Reach, the forgotten outpost on the edge of nowhere, had survived. The silence that followed the Kryll's chaotic departure was profound, stretching across Aethelburg Reach like a held breath. Then, it broke. Not with a bang, but with a hesitant cheer from Ryla on the command deck, quickly echoed by others, swelling into a wave of incredulous, exhausted jubilation that rippled through the colony's comm channels. They had faced the abyss and somehow stepped back from the brink. Aethelburg Reach was battered. Scars from stray Kryll weapons fire marred the colony dome. Several outlying sensor posts were obliterated. Their tiny defense flotilla was decimated, with only the last stand and a couple of heavily damaged shuttles remaining operational. The cost in lives, though miraculously low considering the odds, was still a painful tally of brave souls who wouldn't see this improbable dawn. But they were alive. The colony stood. The Kryll were gone. Days later, the first Galactic Concord ships arrived, not the token observers Jax had despaired of, but a full investigative task force, bristling with scientific equipment and heavily armed cruisers. They had picked up the fading energy signature of the Solaris Resonance field from light years away, an anomaly so potent and bizarre it had overridden all other priorities. Their initial hails were a mixture of disbelief and urgent demand for explanation. What they found on Aethelburg Reach stunned them into an uncharacteristic silence. A tiny resource-strapped colony, armed with little more than mining tools and repurposed communication equipment, had single-handedly repelled a Kryll invasion force that included multiple Obliterator-class warships, vessels that had previously brushed aside entire Concord battle groups. Lyra Nova, blinking in the sudden glare of galactic attention, found herself addressing stern-faced admirals and bewildered xenoscientists. She explained her theories about the Solaris Phyto-Spires, the unique bioenergetic frequencies, and the Kryll's apparent critical vulnerability to this specific form of sensory and network disruption. Her research notes, once dismissed as a niche academic pursuit, were suddenly the most valuable data cache in the Concord. The Xylith child Zephyr, now bright-crested and smiling shyly, was hailed as an unwitting oracle, her fragmented memory a key that had unlocked a galactic secret. Eris, Thorn, covered in grease and still trying to repair Aethelburg's overstressed power grid, became an unwilling celebrity. Concord engineers examining his jury-rigged modifications to the comms array and the power systems spoke in hushed tones of miraculous improvisation and genius-level field engineering. Eris just grumbled about needing more coffee and better quality, conduit piping, but a quiet pride warmed him as he saw the dawning respect in their eyes. He had kept his people safe. That was all that mattered. Jax Volkov, ever the pragmatist, focused on rescue, recovery, and memorializing the fallen. He was offered commendations, promotions, a return to active Concord Fleet Command. He politely declined. "My place is here," he said simply, looking out at the ochre plains now home to the silent, pulsing Solaris Phyto-Spires that had saved them all. He was, however, instrumental in liaising with the Concord forces, ensuring Aethelburg's newfound strategic importance didn't trample its inhabitants. The Xylith refugees, who had braced for another loss, now looked upon the humans of Aethelburg Reach with something akin to awe. They had witnessed firsthand not just human resilience, but a unique blend of compassion, intellectual daring, and unconventional problem-solving that had achieved the impossible. Elder Kalen, his feathery crest held high, formally pledged the Xylith's knowledge of Kryll behavior, however limited, to aid Lyra's ongoing research. Aethelburg Reach was transformed. No longer an obscure outpost on the galactic fringe, it became a beacon of hope. The Solaris Bastion, the primary research center for understanding and potentially weaponizing the anti-Kryll properties of the Phyto-Spires. Scientists and engineers flocked to the Kepler's remnant, eager to study the phenomenon. The Concord, humbled and intrigued, began a massive strategic reassessment. The old ways of fighting the Kryll, brute force against brute force, were suddenly supplemented by a new asymmetric approach, one that valued ecological understanding and unconventional thinking. The humans of Aethelburg hadn't sought glory. They hadn't intended to become heroes. They were engineers, botanists, miners, and reluctant soldiers who had simply refused to lie down and die. Their compassion in sheltering the Xylith, Lyra's persistent curiosity, Eris's rugged ingenuity, and Jax's unwavering resolve, all combined with the unique properties of their adopted world, had not only saved their small colony, but had also given the galaxy a fighting chance. As Lyra stood once more beside a towering Solaris Phyto-Spire, its light now a symbol of defiance rather than just curiosity, she felt a profound sense of connection to the strange, beautiful flora, to her fellow colonists, and to the wider galaxy they had inadvertently touched. The universe was vast and often terrifying, but the events at Aethelburg Reach had proven that even the smallest of lights, when amplified by the best of human spirit, could push back the deepest shadows. The age of accidental heroes and galactic Davids had, it seemed, truly dawned.